Ever planted a grapevine expecting clusters of sweet fruit, only to end up with a giant tangle of leaves and maybe a handful of sad little grapes? You are not alone. Grapes are one of those plants that will absolutely take over your garden with lush green growth, but getting them to actually produce fruit takes a little know-how. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete process of growing grapes that actually fruit, from choosing the right variety all the way through harvest. Plus, stick around to the end, where I will show you a simple pruning trick that can double or even triple your grape production next year. Let us get into it. Grapes are one of the most rewarding fruits you can grow in your home garden. They are beautiful on a trellis or arbor. They come back year after year. And once they get established, a single vine can produce 15 to 20 pounds of fruit every season. The good news is that getting heavy harvests is not complicated once you understand how grapevines actually work. So before we jump into planting and pruning, let us talk about why your grapevines might be giving you all leaves and no fruit in the first place. Here is the thing about grapes that trips a lot of people up. Grapevines are incredibly vigorous growers. Give them decent soil and some water, and they will put out 10, 15, even 20 feet of new growth in a single season. And all of that energy going into leaves and vines is energy that is not going into fruit production. The plant is basically in growth mode instead of fruiting mode. This happens for a few reasons. Too much nitrogen in the soil will push leafy growth at the expense of fruit. Not enough sunlight will do the same thing because the plant needs full sun to trigger flowering. But the biggest reason by far is improper pruning or no pruning at all. Grapes produce fruit on one-year-old wood, which means the canes that grew last summer are the ones that will flower and fruit this summer. If you never prune, you end up with a tangled mess of old wood that produces less and less fruit every year. If you prune too hard at the wrong time, you cut off all the fruiting wood and get nothing but leaves. Understanding this growth habit is the key to everything else we are going to cover. Now let us talk about choosing the right variety and finding the perfect spot to plant. This is where a lot of people make their first mistake, and it can set you back years. Grapes are divided into three main types: American, European, and hybrids. American varieties like Concord and Niagara are the most cold-hardy and disease-resistant. They are perfect if you are in zones 4 through 8 and want grapes for juice, jelly, or fresh eating. European varieties like Thompson Seedless and the wine grapes are less cold-hardy, generally zones 7 through 10, but they have that classic grape flavor most people think of. Hybrids give you the best of both worlds, combining cold hardiness with improved flavor. Varieties like Marquette, Frontenac, and Mars are excellent choices for gardeners in challenging climates. Whatever you choose, make sure it is suited to your USDA zone. I cannot stress this enough. A variety that thrives in California will struggle or die in Minnesota, and vice versa. For your planting site, you need full sun. I am talking at least 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. Grapes will grow in partial shade, but they will not fruit well. You also want good air circulation because grapes are susceptible to fungal diseases, and stagnant humid air is their enemy. A gentle slope is ideal because it allows cold air to drain away on frosty nights. But flat ground works fine as long as it is not a low spot where cold air pools. Soil should be well draining. Grapes hate wet feet more than almost any other fruit. Sandy loam is perfect, but they will tolerate clay as long as it drains. One more thing, plan for the long term. A grapevine can live and produce for 50 years or more, so choose a spot where it can stay permanently. All right, let us get these vines in the ground. The best time to plant grapes is early spring, as soon as the soil can be worked, usually about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date. You can also plant in fall, at least 6 weeks before your first frost, which gives the roots time to establish before winter. Most grapevines are sold as bare root plants or in 1-gallon containers. Either works fine, but bare root plants are usually cheaper and establish just as well if you plant them while they are still dormant. Dig a hole about 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. If you are planting multiple vines, space them 6 to 8 feet apart for most varieties, or up to 10 feet for very vigorous growers. Take a look at the roots before planting. If they are circling around from being in a pot, gently spread them out. If any roots are broken or damaged, trim them back to healthy tissue with clean pruners. Set the vine in the hole so the graft union, that little bump where the fruiting variety meets the rootstock, sits about 2 inches above the soil line. If your vine is on its own roots with no graft, plant it at the same depth it was growing in the nursery. Backfill with the native soil you dug out. I do not add compost or fertilizer to the planting hole because you want those roots to grow out into the native soil, not stay in a little pocket of rich amended soil. Water deeply right after planting, giving it a good 2 to 3 gallons to settle the soil around the roots. Then mulch with 3 to 4 inches of wood chips or straw, keeping it a few inches away from the trunk to prevent rot. Now here is something most people skip, but I think is really important. Right after planting, prune that vine back hard. I know it feels wrong to cut back a plant you just paid good money for, but trust me on this. Cut it back to just 2 or 3 buds above the soil line. This forces all the plant's energy into developing a strong root system that first year instead of trying to support a bunch of top growth. You are playing the long game here, and a well-rooted vine will outproduce a weak-rooted one for decades to come. Training and supporting your grapevines properly is absolutely critical, and this is where things get fun. Unlike tomatoes, where you can kind of get away with a flimsy cage, grapes need a serious support structure that will last for years. The good news is you have options depending on your space and goals. The most common system for home gardeners is the simple 2-wire trellis. You set sturdy posts, 4x4 or heavy-duty metal T-posts, about 8 feet apart and anchor them well because a mature vine loaded with fruit is heavy. Run 2 wires horizontally between the posts, one at about 3 feet high and one at about 5 or 6 feet. The lower wire is where your main horizontal arms, called cordons, will grow. The upper wire supports the fruiting canes that grow upward from those cordons. This system is easy to maintain, easy to harvest from, and works great for most table grape varieties. If you want something more ornamental, you can train grapes over an arbor or pergola. This looks beautiful and creates shade, but understand that it makes pruning and harvesting more difficult. You will be reaching overhead for everything. I have a small arbor over my patio with a Concord grape, and while I love sitting under it in summer, I will admit that managing it takes more effort than my trellised vines. For that first year after planting, your only goal is to grow one strong vertical shoot. This will become your permanent trunk. Let it grow up a stake or string tied to your trellis wire. Remove any other shoots that try to grow from the base. You want all the energy going into that one main stem. Once it reaches the height of your lower trellis wire, usually the second year, you will train 2 shoots horizontally along that wire in opposite directions. These become your permanent cordons. From these cordons, fruiting canes will grow upward each year. I like to wrap the cordons loosely around the wire as they grow. Do not tie them too tight, because the vine will thicken over time, and tight ties can girdle and kill it. Use soft plant ties or old strips of t-shirt and check them every few months to make sure they are not cutting in. All right, here is the big one. Pruning. This is where most gardeners either give up or make mistakes that cost them their harvest. But once you understand the logic behind it, grape pruning is actually pretty straightforward. Remember what I said earlier about grapes fruiting on 1-year-old wood? That is the key to everything. 1-year-old wood is the canes that grew last summer. They are smooth and tan or reddish colored. 2-year-old wood is darker, rougher, and has little side spurs on it. Old wood, 3 years and older, is gray and shaggy, looking with peeling bark. If you want to subscribe and you are enjoying learning about grapes, now is a great time to hit that button. All right, back to pruning. You want to prune grapes in late winter while they are fully dormant, usually late February through early March, depending on your climate. Pruning too early in winter can expose cuts to cold damage. Pruning too late, after the buds start swelling, causes the vine to bleed sap excessively, which weakens it. There are two main pruning methods, cane pruning and spur pruning. For most home gardeners growing American or hybrid varieties, I recommend cane pruning because it is more forgiving and tends to produce more consistent yields. Here is how cane pruning works. Each winter, you select 2 to 4 of the best 1-year-old canes growing from your permanent cordons. These should be pencil thickness, healthy looking, and growing in a good position. Each of these canes will have buds along its length, and each bud is a potential cluster of grapes. You want to leave about 8 to 12 buds per cane, depending on the vigor of your vine and variety. Cut the cane just beyond your chosen number of buds. Then, and this is crucial, you remove everything else. All the other 1-year-old canes. All the old fruiting canes from last year. All of it goes. It feels brutal the first time you do it. You will look at your vine and think you have killed it. But this is exactly what the vine needs. You are channeling all its energy into those selected canes and the fruit they will produce. Spur pruning is a little different and works well for European wine varieties and some table grapes. Instead of selecting whole canes, you cut each 1-year-old cane back to just 2 or 3 buds, creating short spurs all along your cordons. These spurs produce fruiting shoots each spring. Over time, the spurs build up into little knobby structures along the cordon. Spur pruning is faster once you get the hang of it, but it does not work well for varieties that produce their best fruit from buds further out on the cane. If you are not sure which method is best for your variety, a quick search online or a call to your local extension office will point you in the right direction. One more pruning tip that makes a huge difference. In early summer, once your fruiting shoots have grown a couple feet and you can see the flower clusters forming, go through and do some thinning. Remove shoots that have no flower clusters. If you have too many clusters on one shoot, pinch off the smallest ones to leave 1 or 2 per shoot. This reduces the total number of grape clusters, but the ones that remain will be larger, sweeter, and ripen more evenly. Quality over quantity. Water and fertilizer are the next pieces of the puzzle, and with grapes, less is often more. Established grapevines are remarkably drought tolerant once their deep root systems develop, usually by year 3 or 4. In fact, moderate water stress actually improves fruit quality by concentrating sugars and flavors. That said, newly planted vines and vines during fruit development do need consistent moisture. For the first 2 years, water deeply once a week during dry spells, giving each vine about 5 gallons. You want to encourage roots to grow deep, so infrequent deep watering is much better than frequent shallow watering. Once established, you can back off to watering every 2 to 3 weeks during extended dry periods, or not at all if you get regular rainfall. During the final few weeks before harvest, some growers deliberately withhold water to stress the vines slightly and increase sugar content in the fruit. Just do not let them wilt. Drip irrigation works beautifully for grapes. Run a drip line along the base of your vines with 2 emitters per plant, 1 on each side of the trunk about 12 inches out. This keeps water off the leaves, which helps prevent fungal diseases and delivers moisture right to the root zone where it is needed. If you are hand watering, water at the base of the vine, not overhead, for the same reason. Fertilizing grapes is where a lot of people go wrong by overdoing it. Too much nitrogen, and I see this all the time, pushes excessive leafy growth and actually reduces fruit production. Remember how we talked about the vine being in growth mode versus fruiting mode? Heavy nitrogen keeps it stuck in growth mode. For most home garden situations, grapes need very little fertilizer, if any. If your soil is reasonably decent, you might not need to fertilize at all. I apply about 2 inches of compost around the base of my vines each spring, keeping it away from the trunk, and that is it. The slow-release nutrients from the compost are enough to keep them happy without pushing too much growth. If your vines are showing signs of nutrient deficiency, pale leaves, poor growth, or small fruit, a balanced organic fertilizer applied in early spring can help. Look for something with an NPK ratio where the first number is not dramatically higher than the others. 10, 10, 10, or something similar works fine. Apply about half a pound per vine scattered around the drip line, then water it in. 1 application in spring is plenty. Do not fertilize after early summer because you do not want to encourage tender new growth heading into fall that could be damaged by frost. Let us talk about problems, because even well-cared for grapevines run into issues sometimes, and knowing what to look for can save your harvest. The most common problems are fungal diseases, and they almost all start the same way, with wet foliage that stays wet. Powdery mildew shows up as a white dusty coating on leaves and fruit. Downy mildew creates yellow spots on the tops of leaves with fuzzy gray growth underneath. Black rot causes brown spots on leaves and shriveled, mummified fruit. The prevention for all of these is the same: good air circulation, proper pruning to open up the canopy, and keeping leaves dry. If you water with drip irrigation and prune to allow airflow through the vine, you will avoid most fungal issues without ever spraying anything. If you do get fungal problems, remove and destroy affected leaves and fruit immediately. Do not compost them. For organic control, neem oil or a sulfur-based fungicide applied early can help prevent spread. The key is catching it early before it gets established. Once black rot mummies are hanging all over your vine, you are fighting an uphill battle. Japanese beetles can be a serious pest in some areas. These metallic green and copper beetles chew holes in leaves and can defoliate a vine quickly if populations are high. The simplest control is hand-picking them into a bucket of soapy water in the morning when they are sluggish. You can also hang beetle traps, but place them well away from your vines, because the traps actually attract beetles from a wide area. Birds love grapes just as much as we do, and they always seem to know exactly when the fruit is ripe. Bird netting draped over the vines a few weeks before harvest is the only reliable solution. Make sure to secure the edges so birds cannot find their way in and get trapped. Grapeberry moth is sneaky because the damage happens inside the fruit. You will notice webbing around clusters and berries that look shriveled or have small holes. The larvae tunnel into the berries and eat from the inside. Removing damaged fruit and fallen berries helps break the cycle. For serious infestations, spinosad is an organic option that targets the caterpillars. One more thing. If your vines look healthy but just are not producing fruit, it might simply be an age issue. Most grapevines do not produce a significant harvest until their 3rd or 4th year. Be patient. Those first few years of careful training and root development pay off enormously down the road. Harvesting grapes is the moment you have been waiting for, and timing matters more than you might think. Unlike some fruits, grapes do not continue ripening after they are picked. What you harvest is what you get, so you want to wait until they are fully ripe. The color change is your first clue. Grapes deepen in color as they ripen, green varieties becoming more golden, red varieties becoming deeper purple. But color alone is not reliable because grapes often reach full color 1 to 3 weeks before they are actually ripe. The real test is taste. Start sampling a few berries once they look ripe. You are looking for full sweetness with no green or tart flavor. The seeds inside, if your variety has them, should be brown, not green. The stem where the cluster attaches to the vine, called the rachis, should also be browning and starting to turn woody. To harvest, use sharp pruners or scissors to cut the whole cluster from the vine. Handle clusters gently because the fruit bruises easily. Harvest in the morning when temperatures are cool if you plan to store them. Fresh grapes will keep in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 weeks in a perforated plastic bag. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning, and this one can seriously transform your grape production. It is called double pruning, and it takes about 5 minutes per vine in early spring. Here is the idea. Even with perfect winter pruning, grapes often push out lots of shoots from buds at the base of your selected canes. These basal shoots rarely produce fruit and they crowd the canopy. The trick is to wait until early spring, just as the buds are starting to swell but before they fully break, and do a second light pruning. Go through and rub off or snap off any buds at the base of your fruiting canes, the first 2 or 3 buds closest to the cordon. Also remove any buds pointing straight down or into the center of the vine where they would create crowding. This simple step reduces competition for resources, improves airflow through the canopy, and channels energy into the buds that will actually produce quality fruit. Growers who use this technique regularly report 20 to 30% increases in yield with larger, more evenly ripened clusters. I started doing this about 4 years ago after reading about it in a viticulture guide, and the difference was obvious that first season. It costs nothing, takes just a few minutes, and works on any grape variety. So that is everything you need to know to grow grapes that actually produce fruit instead of just endless leaves. From choosing the right variety to that final harvest, you now have a complete roadmap. If this video helped you out, I would really appreciate a subscribe and a tap on that bell icon so you catch future videos. Drop any questions in the comments below. I read every one and I am always happy to help. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.